And our effort has been to try to see how we can actually circumvent this sort of binary and somewhere in the drift seek other possibilities. And that's what brings me to non-fascist living. We borrowed this term from Foucault. It's not really a term he elaborates on, but it's a brief mentioning in the introduction to Anti-Oedipus, Capitalism and Schizophrenia, to English, to American edition of the book, I believe 1985, where he likens Anti-Oedipus to an introduction to non-fascist life. Of course, we picked up this as a very important sort of guideline for our work a long time ago, but with the resurfacing of fascisms all around us, we thought it's important to bring it to the forefront. Now, the project is decidedly not about fascism. This may sound slightly conflicting, but the idea is not to make a cartography of contemporary fascism, or not only doing that. And it's not about, of course, when you hear fascism, you think fascisms of Hitler and Mussolini. But also, you know, we need to take into contemporary fascisms all around that. But most importantly, this is where Foucault comes into the play, fascism in our heads. Foucault talks about non-fascist living as the art of living counter to all forms of fascism. And again, not only historical fascisms or contemporary fascisms today, but any forms of fascism that, and I quote here, causes us to love power, to desire the very thing that dominates and exploits us. And if you think about where I started, this is indeed about how do we rethink the operation of power. Not in a banal kind of lefty way, you know, I don't want to have anything to do with power, but how we acknowledge power, the power we have, and how we think about rebalancing that. Importantly, I think, I would then borrow, in conclusion, a thought from Sueli Rolnik, who would talk about a rebellion, and specifically in the field of art, like important rebellion against violence towards life, as proposition for non-fascism. Against violence towards life, all sorts of life, whether human, non-human, organic and non-organic. It is a struggle that does not concern just those who occupy subordinate positions, but it transverses across the society, biosphere and the planet. This would be a matter then of affirming life, abandoning power relations as we know them, and resisting abuse in any sort of shape and form. And I'm convinced that institutions instituted otherwise could become an important alliance in this. And I leave it here, hopefully, for conversation later. Thank you. I don't know how to do this.
Hi. The next speaker in the quick-fire part of the afternoon plenum session is Hee Jin Kim, a wonderful colleague from Seoul, Korea, who's currently working with a very large-scale museum in Seoul, but the earlier part of whose career is defined by a very close relation to a small and independent art space called Pool that's enormously important within the emergence of contemporary art in Korea, and also for its links to the democracy movement. So, please, Hee Jin, we look forward to your take on this thematic of precarious practices.
Hi. Well, I thank actually Carol, who kind of tasted you really remote, different cultural context of China. So I can somehow lean on it, partly as a general introduction, kind of similar, but very different. And I want to just start from 3 points. I'm going to just, I want you to remember, is because the one that I'm going to do is a kind of broad macro survey sketch of the, the broad picture, not the specific curatorial practices I've been doing per se. And the second, in my short talk, there will be a lot of we in this case, in my occasion, it is definitely Koreans. Sorry. So, because I decided to, really realize I'm going to talk something that I know. So I've been stuck in the local scene for a long time. So I never aim to just portray any universal we. And then perhaps you might just pick up some relevance, universal relevance later on, and we can discuss. And then language-wise, another decision that I made recently is I'm going to really escape myself, free myself from this burden of curatorial rhetoric or curatorial trope as a way to redevelop myself towards our living, in a way. So my language could be deliberately really colloquial, partly due to my language barrier, but sometimes it's for me, alternative way of living. So I'm going to show you this. This is, perhaps some of you may have seen this kind of image from the press. Exactly 1 year before, I was standing there in one of there, and then we've been, in this case, I and many citizens of Seoul or many other cities in Korea actually spent more than 20 Saturdays throughout the winter to realize something. And now, after 1 year, we are sort of analyzing what we did. That is a grand sight itself, and we got somehow enamored by this another, glamorous revolutionary dream, whatever, but we are not delusioned by that anymore. So we want to really analyze what that was. And some political scientists say it was another evolutionary, different type of revolution, and they just put all this formula of, collective versus association of connected individuals, whatever. But, well, it's definitely true, but that is not enough. What was it? And then I came to think it was definitely not just for kicking out one government, on and on and on, and the bad government came up all the time. And then we were just sacrificing 24 around Saturdays in the harsh Siberian winter, in the super connected society, digitalized society, even definitely overworked individuals sacrifice their Saturdays like that only to kick off one woman president. I don't know. So it is definitely more than that. I now think it was more like an ultimate outcry for first, and just kicking off some trashes, definitely. And second, it was something like outcry for revisioning a different type of governance, please. And the third, going beyond just simple social democracy, please. And third was like we really wanted to reevaluate this value system. Please adjust or propose some different type of value system that hopefully now goes toward the value of living, value of life. So there is this element of reconfiguration of ethical questions at the bottom, even though all political scientists are just looking at the surface as a phenomenon, but that was not the whole thing. So many layers are there whenever I see it, and now as time goes on, I definitely think that was the most wonderful art that Korea has produced in recent 80 years. So that kind of imagination and sort of questioning itself was so relevant, and so to the point, if we can call it as the right function of art we can expect nowadays. And then, then what happened? That's what was behind it. You may be rather ignorant about it, so let me see what kind of thing has happened there. You see a lot of crowd over there, but the kind of politics the Korean government has run for 8 or 9 years, 2 consecutive conservative governments actually ran this politics of horror and terror and also fear. And then you see typical, now I came to know the language like antagonistic society, politics, whatever. Yeah, that's the kind of thing. So divide people, segmentize it, isolate it, and brand them, bash them, and somehow use it as a kind of their legitimacy, because they are standing on very weak legitimacy. They want to use the bad energy, the negative energy as a mechanism, right? Anyhow, so on top of this DMZ, we do have so many division lines over there. So people got, even though it is one monolithic language group and people, it's got segmented into so many antagonistic societies or community group. I wouldn't go detail into what type of cartography they mean, but on the bottom right side, you may see the different totally new advance of different type of netizen. They call themselves ilbe, but it's a mixture. We don't know exactly what the identity was. It was like a ghost or something popping up all of a sudden as a totally agonistic tribe of young people, but now he came to know it was sponsored partly by the government. Anyway, it even included totally elite people. It never followed any ideological line. It is total sickness about this pre-existing governance structure. So it is a new symptom. So we want to know more until we identify what the whole essence of it. And here, that was also the part of the whole motivation of the candle rally, even though it was the head and tail, but nobody talks and cares about it that much. But it started from here, actually. It is a blank list of artists and cultural producers, over 9,000 people. I mean, and it was not just one, incident. It was initiated back in 2008. Of course, there's a certain degree of censorship. We feel it, but there was no evidence. And this was official, systematic, elimination of cultural producers and artists for 8-9 years in a row, gradually choke you. So what did they do with this? I mean, they means in this case not just government, but NIC, which is a National Intelligence Service. So that means the government privatized the whole national institutions to run this, operate this. And the ones that are enlisted here, they are sort of banned from, is the pre-elimination from any possibility of production. That means you apply for fund, but you are already eliminated from the application process, because they check this name here, it pops up, okay, so you're gone. And then the second is that you don't get any position, like you are not allowed into the decision-making process as a jury, as a, director, whatever. So you don't get onto this, you don't have this scope of reading, right? And the third was, really dirty terms. You don't get space to show your work. So it's a threefold kind of choking in neoliberal terms, right? So you have no space in Korea means, you have no place to show your work. You cannot loan it. Temporarily use it. That means, you have no exposure. You have no visibility. We don't have this kind of diverse, markets in there. Anyway, so if you witness and observe and live within this kind of gradual, totally controlled surveillance plus some sort of economical humiliating condition for 8 or 9 years, what will happen? And they actually attack only some influential low-in group, the mid-career group. That means the influences are gone gradually. You can imagine that gradually the influential people are disappearing. And then juniors are, they are just running like crazy with no direction, So we were somehow operating already malfunctioning system on and on and on for 8 or 9 years. And then So this is the mechanism that is being investigated and just reviewed by the special commission, now just appointed, shaped up by the new government that launched in this May. So you may see the whole mechanism goes from the Blue House and the Ministry of Defense. What did I do? So on the other, you may see how many national institutions and agencies are all incorporated to operate this, plot. So the Ministry of Defense sponsored extremists, that is the civilians. Even they are sponsored and just used as a kind of interpersonal attacker. And then the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and they actually totally manage it, this distribution and functioning of this blacklisting into reality. Anyway, so now artists, after just cleaning the trashes, that means at least we need to practically put the system back into the normal condition, right? So we are investigating and just putting some into the sentences and trials. It's still going on. It may take another year. And so gradually we are retrieving ourselves back to at least some democratic model of normal, functioning. But artists, as I said, we've been already quite much pushed into the corner, like ultimate cry for ethics, the basic ethics that motivate you for the work of art anyway. So now artists are mobilizing themselves, and they are doing this phase of performance. It's a new checking experimentality. I mean, we are doing some sort of discursive democracy, you may call. This morning we were talking about the malfunctioning of the parliamentary democracy anymore. Sure, it's gone already. So we are starting from very small gatherings, and we are just mixing languages together. But anyway, we want to first put this legal system. Otherwise, I mean, as long as you are a precarious condition, you cannot just dream at all. Anyhow, let's be realistic. So we are putting first some systems together. So you may see some statistics of general average Korean or artist based in Seoul. So income level is that low, and income source, studio has only 14, and employment type definitely freelancer 84%, and labor contract has never experienced it, 48%. Labor struggle experienced it already, 40% more. And then the more shocking thing is, I mean, income it could be low, but they are making money anyhow for their surviving. So that means they are doing something, but the work is definitely not related to art at all. It's just pure, sheer manual labor to make your living. That percentage goes over 50%. And if they are sitting on that and living on that, that is another big problem. So we, with these statistics, we are making the basic welfare system, and we are also checking some labor law. It has never been registered as laborer in constitutional law. So now how can we put ourselves visible in the law, right? And the second, diversity is not just, we don't just aim at any sort of just plural freedom, liberal model. We are looking at more like how we are checking ourselves ontologically, our mindset. Because it has been totally flattened and also standardized by some terror politics, I don't know. But we, in this case, thanks to this opportunity, we are revisiting what we have known, right? So we are definitely thinking again, decolonization, do we know it? Have we ever acted in that way? We are still suffering from this aspiration, right, towards the first word. And then how can we revisit our languages? And so we began to say, like, let's just say what you know and de-learn. Let's de-learn ourselves from all the professional pretensions, and we go back to something that we can really feasibly know. So that is a big ontological, self-enlightenment that should be going on, and that is really taking a long time, but we are starting off. Infrastructure, definitely we need to build it up beyond the socio-democratic model. It has been quite much entrapped in this, agonistic, whatever. This morning I got this word right. Agonistic, what was it? Entrapped in, where is Bassam? Agonistic pluralism, yeah. That was another trap, but how can you use it in a good way, and what kind of infrastructure? How can we design it? And the process. How can we mobilize our opinions, and how we organize that opinions into some fashion of system, please? So education is the whole process of the learning and learning process anew in our mother tongue. That's what we are doing. And then, okay, in that regard, the city government of Seoul, I don't want to just flattering my boss, but anyhow, the city government of Seoul has been kind of just confronting to this central government for a long time. Of course, it has some problems with urban gentrification, but anyhow, the vision paper is not bad. This city mayor has set up this culture, almost a socio-political campaign for a long time. It's a vision paper 2030, and its first aim was culture city, so that means providing a lot of infrastructure, so that it's a political space. So that people can just sit around, exchange their ideas and do something altogether anyway for a common use. That is the infrastructuring, physical infrastructuring. And the second was the cultural citizen city. That is, I believe, it is more like the level of intersubjective dialogue and process. So we want to go over there. He is doing so many things all across the city. The yellow stars are small and large, creation of small and large spaces, cultural spaces. You guys are all welcome to please contribute something as a good model of using it. And then the scale, it is totally different from the 50s or prior to the 50s construction model. You go, and it's utilizing, upcycling totally small and large bits and pieces of lands, territory, even recycling some abandoned building to regenerate the community. And then, so you may imagine, we are starkly confronting the totally different alien communities, sometimes really who have never experienced art in their life. We are experiencing them within Seoul. And I am, currently working within this museum, but my job is not just creating a show. As a part of this whole social campaign from the city government, I am making 3 museums within 5 years. I don't know what I'm doing, but what I'm doing is like small and large scale of different cultural political spaces, so that the next freelance artists or curators may use it in a good way. But in this case, you should just remember, their blacklist was there, but for the past 9 years, government opened this $300 million of fund, which is only the 1 out of 9 kinds of fund. The whole money was provided onto the freelance, independent creators like you. Then what happened? We should ask ourselves, they were spending all the money. Were they just reproducing the capitalist machine? Under the capitalist machine? To me, it is a really sharp question, because they are my colleagues. We should re-examine ourselves whether we were just a part of a big capitalist machine or not. The money is still there, but always I came across the public officials asking, we've been just safeguarding this fund at least for a certain amount of freedom for you. And that is now for us, it is a assignment and critiquing process for the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're gonna shift focus to this place over here. Do you want to come along? And also, while we're doing that, would you please kind of pull into the space because there are people coming, and there is a block right around this area. I'm just circling. So we are very pleased. I'm going to speak very slowly so that everyone can sit down in the right direction. So many of you came with us yesterday to the Black Archives to see Imara Limon's latest production that has been a collaboration with more people, but whose names I unfortunately don't know. Her research into Dutch colonial heritage has led her to challenge the institutions that she's involved with, and I'm very happy to have met you here through this project, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It's really nice to be here, and it was also really nice to see a lot of you yesterday at our opening at the Black Archives in Amsterdam East. So my name is Imara Limon, and I'm a curator at the Amsterdam Museum. The Amsterdam Museum is the city museum, holding the collections of the city, all kinds of objects, but also stories, because the museum has its mission to tell personal stories. It's been the city museum since '75, and there's more and more emphasis on inhabitants of the city to not only collect objects and tell these stories in small text books, but also to really hear the voices of the people in the city. I came to the museum about 1.5 years ago when I was invited as a guest curator to make the exhibition Black Amsterdam during the first Black Achievement Month, Black History Month of the Netherlands, that didn't exist until last year in October, and this year we've had the second Black Achievement Month in the Netherlands. Maybe first of all about institutions, arts institutions. I have a background in art history and used to work more in the contemporary art field, and the shift to the Cultural Historical Museum was really interesting to me because I've always been working on cultural heritage and representation, and already during my studies in art I was always fascinated by the lack of knowledge that we got about colonial past, about the very specific context of the Netherlands being implicated in this history. And I wanted to talk today about the Black Archives, but I also feel that it's very related to the other things that I've done at the museum. To start with this Black Amsterdam project, where we were talking about role models in the city, black role models, asking people who is your black role model, and what we got as a response was often not the names that we expected. We were collecting the names, but then we realized that people didn't see black people in the Netherlands or in Amsterdam necessarily as their big role models. They were looking at Michelle Obama and international examples, or even wondering what is black, because black is not something that has been very clearly talked about in the Netherlands. Zwart is a bit uncomfortable. Oh, let me also have the slides with this. Aiming here, yeah. So this got into a conversation about the deeper layers of not only about black and white, but also about what is the institution, because what does it mean that institutions such as universities, but also museums and other cultural heritage institutions don't deal with these histories and these cultural identities. So in this exhibition we put a text on the wall that was about the white institution, and this was something that evoked something with visitors, but also very much behind the screens. With my colleagues I got invited to the curatorial meetings and had to explain what my vision about the multiplicity of voices was, and I realized I was always expecting then oh, they are also going to tell me what their vision on it is, but now after 1.5 years I've realized that there is no notion of it. It's never been discussed what it means to people, what it means to different departments to deal with multiplicity of voices. So since then, it's been my mission to think about not only the programs that we do, the people that are involved in it, the stories and the histories that are told, but very much also about the identity of the institution, because I found that it self-identifies strangely as aiming for objective, being objective, being careful not to let too much activism in, really paraphrasing this. And if you do this as an institution, then I feel that it's impossible to work with so-called new audiences and difficult past, because you will automatically do it wrong. It's really a question of who is doing this and who is capable of doing this, because of course the people who work in an institution, the programs that you make, the audience that you get, it's always input is output for me. So in the case of the Black Archives, this is the Black Archives on the screens. For a long time it's been accessible through guided tours and the stories of people who work at the Black Archives, looking at the documents and the books that you see here. And as a collaboration, as a freelance curator, which I was doing in the museum, they've asked me to make an exhibition about the archives with them. And at the beginning of the process, this was very much about how to make an exhibition, how to do this, very practical. But there was also an institution involved where I was working at. And how do you navigate this? Because what an institution wants and what the Black Archives want was very different. Because the institution, of course, wants its, well, not to say logo, but a kind of visibility to connect diversity projects very much with their own identity, to say that we work with communities, we help make them visible, and it's already in this language of how you communicate a collaboration, and collaboration was not even a preferred word anymore at some point. It was more than about support or making something, it's in English more difficult, samen iets tot stand brengen, for Dutch people among us. So this relation between the institution, the museum, and the organization of the Black Archives also changed during the process. We very much took it step by step. Next. Yeah, importantly, the exhibition that we've opened yesterday didn't take place in the museum. It took place in a building that is owned by a Surinamese society, which holds the archives of the Black Archives. It's a collection of, I should explain about this, it's a collection of different sub-collections from people who are somehow related to the Surinamese society, which is the oldest migrant society in the Netherlands of Surinamese people. Started very much as a society where people who came to the Netherlands were somehow helped them integrate. It's not a word that we would use anymore, but integration then was more in the form of a welfare organization, and then turned into a more political force, also being involved in the decolonization of Suriname as a former Dutch colony in 1975, which was the same year that the Amsterdam Museum started as a museum. And in this building is where we opened the exhibition yesterday. The exhibition is about two key figures who, it will be a really long story if I start telling this, should come to the exhibition. But I wanted to make one more point about this collaboration. But I will show you, this one back. Beautiful image made by designer Raoul Balai. He made the exhibition, the graphic design for the exhibition, because it is an exhibition, of course, from an archive with a lot of documents, photos, and to make this accessible for people was very much also about what do you show, what do you tell. It's a lot of text and it's a lot of documents, and how do you make this also visually attractive. And but the last point I wanted to make was also the agency of who gets to tell these stories, because the reason that they asked me to make the exhibition was an encounter we had last year, back to when I was invited by the museum to make an exhibition about black role models, because someone suggested, don't you want to have Hermine Huiswoud and Otto Huiswoud as role models? And their story was very unknown to the Netherlands. they were two black radicals who came to the Netherlands after the Second World War, so in the end of the 40s. And they brought their international struggle for black emancipation to the Netherlands and had a big influence on the Surinamese society, but also broader than that. And all their documents are at, no, not all their documents, a lot of documents about this struggle are at the archives, but also in, for example, archives in the United States. And this unknown history, it has a lot of impact for me personally. For example, when I realized that there is a whole emancipation struggle, it was something that was very empowering, because this was exactly the narratives that I didn't learn. I learned a little bit about slavery and colonialism, and it's always in a, how do you say that, a balance of power, of victims, winners, losers, and this was a history of emancipation. And it would be very dangerous if a museum or an institution would be the first ones to tell this history without the Black Archives having their own moment of sharing this, of making it accessible to the public. So it's also a specific timeline of not only the agency of who gets to tell it, but also when does something like this happen. So that's what, a lot of things happened in this process, and now that the exhibition has opened and that it's the story of the Black Archives, I also feel that then it would be important to tell this history as an institution as well, but to always refer to where it comes from, to have these narratives at the right place. Just like something in the Netherlands that you see now is a funny headline in the newspaper that said, the Tropical Museum is decolonizing right now, which is something that has been more of a buzzword recently, of social movements and activists decolonizing in museums, and now then the newspapers pick it up as in a museum decolonizing itself, which is of course crazy. So these were some examples that I wanted to share with you. There's a lot more to tell, I realized that, but I'll just keep it short, and I hope we can discuss it a bit later even more.
Wonderful. Thanks. Many thanks, Samara. And something that I particularly found interesting there was the note of timeliness. So Hee Jin had sort of spoken about time and the significance of temporality, as did Maria. But I found interesting there the notion of timeliness, that it's not just the amount of time that something's been in an archive or coming up, but the order in which things occur, what's first and second as well. So the next speaker in this little round is a curator, Manuela Moscoso. So she indeed has a substantial institutional affiliation with the Museo Tamayo, but also works on an initiative, and please in advance excuse my pronunciation, Zarigüeya Alabado Contemporaneano, sorry, in Ecuador, which poses an interesting position as something that is indeed contingent and freelance, but nonetheless is premised upon maintaining access and hold upon what infrastructures there are institutionally within a infrastructurally poor area. So I look forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, and I wanted to start a little bit by saying that a little bit how I see the work as a curator myself. I was for many years freelance curator, and the last 3 years I worked in an institution, and somehow being a freelance has formed the way I think and I act in relation to what type of projects I want to be involved, or I have to be involved, or I invited, or the different forms that can take. And in a way I feel that somehow I am this body curator that belongs to many collectives at the same time, that somehow I really truly believe that we don't finish when the skin finishes, but actually we are enacting politics and different forms of power relationship, different forms of affectivities at the same time that I am here sitting with you. So in a way I am a curator from Ecuador, but as well I am a curator working in an institution in Mexico, and at the same time a woman working in an institution, and like this is like kind of different forms of collectiveness, and depending where I sort of work, it somehow has to be formed, or I have to sort of respond to the different Manuelas I am, in a way. And sometimes it's difficult because they can contradict to themselves. So I think that's what I try to do, that somehow I'm aware of all these collectivities that I am at the same time. And a little bit is that's where Zarigüeya comes from. And Zarigüeya, Zarigüeya, I will tell you a little bit about Ecuador, because many people think Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and they jump. So Ecuador is there. So it's like actually this very small country in the equator, and Quito is a city that is a 2 million people, so it's not so big, it's the capital. Ecuador, since the 2000s more or less, we had a very big crisis, economical crisis, together with many other South American countries. We were not the only ones. But actually it really affected the cultural scene, meaning that all the museums and all the gallery and art initiatives closed completely. And some of them haven't been open until they, possibly will be open in the future, close future. That's the state museums. And like maybe 7 years ago, a contemporary art museum started called CAC, but they haven't really. I think they still are working on what they actually are. If they are a contemporary art center or a social center, so they are finding their identity, which I think is good, because if you don't have references, I think learning by doing is the way as well, no? So where Zarigüeya comes from is that I have been living away from Ecuador maybe 20 years, and I recently, like maybe already 4 years ago or 5, I did a biennial there, and I reconnected with Ecuador and with a lot of people there, and I also reconnected with, it went by itself? I think it's by itself, no? Or did I do something? No? It's okay. So I think, so I wanted to to do something in Ecuador, but knowing that I actually, first, I don't live there. Second, I have a different energy at the moment than, I think it's very important also when you start a project, I think for any freelance curator, is to know how much energy you can put in each project, because otherwise it's very, very hard to maintain many different places and many different projects at the same time. So I think knowing how much time in advance you can commit, it's very, very important. So I knew that I didn't want to live there, and also I knew that, but I wanted to do something there. I wanted to really sort of contribute to the scene, where the scene is really, it's always in production, and also when a context of South America that is very, very important that I want to mention is that actually art fairs are becoming like the platform to do things, and because are the most stable platforms to present art. So you have the art fair in Bogota, very, very powerful, Lima, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, all of them have the art fair as a platform, and it becomes a kind of the equivalent of a museum in certain places, which is very, very dangerous for art practices. So I think that's why my starting point. One, how to do a project in a place where you can deliver a certain amount of time, and you don't live there, so you cannot do like an artist-run space where you need a lot of energy and a lot of commitment. Also, I'm in a different age. I think maybe if I'm in my 20s, I have the energy. Now in my 40s, I think I want to engage in a different way. But also, I think also how you can really affect in practices that are like now, like the art practice, not only the curating practice, but how you can affect how not everything goes into the art fair. That, in Ecuador, in Latin America, there is important collectors, but a lot of collectors don't have so much money, so sizes and forms, they start to look alike from one place to the other, so it's very dangerous. So what we decided to do is, to go to one museum that opened 5 years ago, that is a Pre-Columbian Museum, that is actually private and has, like an ethnographic with pieces from 4,000 years ago, before Christ, till when the Incas arrived to to what is Ecuador now, that is the 1500s, just 50 years before the Spaniards arrived. So let's say the area of Ecuador had first the Incas and then the Spaniards. So many of the cultures in Ecuador were already colonized first, and many of the histories of these people before the Incas were disappeared already, you know, but the Incas were really strong in eliminating. So what we had is this Pre-Columbian Museum with pieces from all Ecuador and a stable place. So what I decided to do, instead of making I proposed to do, instead of making another institution, was to propose to other two people, Manuela Rivadeneira, an artist from Ecuador, and Pablo Lafuente, curator from Spain, now Brazil, to start something together. And so what we went to the museum, blah blah blah, and we found this that is a zarigüeya. In zarigüeya, it's very important. I will tell you, a zarigüeya, it's also called tlacuaches, churchas, opossums, filandros, ellas, cuicas, catitas, zorras, mochileras, yacas, coyopines, comadrejas, overas, mucurras, carachupas, micurris, mucamucas, picasas, ranchos, paricatas, huaquis, chuchas, and so on. Because it's like actually the only animal that is like from all America, like it goes all America. And they're really, they can live in every environment, and they're old. Like this is an old animal that has not changed, and they are like living in all America. And in all America, you have representations of them. Like, and all these names are from different areas in America, how they call them. You know, zarigüeyas will be like the Spanish way to call it, and they are fantastic because one is that they are very old. The second one, that's why they are important, is because they have the possibility to play dead when they have fear. So when, you know, have somebody attack, they can actually stop the heart so badly that they play dead and then they are saved. So what they are is actually an amazing figure because it's a figure that can go to the two worlds, to the dead and the living. And because they can communicate between the dead and the living, they're actually some sort of communicators, mediators, but not like good or bad. They're not like the nice guys they're also gossipers, and they make chicken eggs, you know, like they are not, how you say it, they can take many forms, but they are the only ones who can cross borders. So in a way it's an interesting figure because it's a figure that can cross boundaries or frontiers without having like a moral of being good or bad. You know, they can be sometimes a little bit more correct and sometimes not. Sometimes they can be even liars. So their presentations are quite fantastic. The other thing is that they are marsupiales. It's called in English. So they carry people around like this image, which is fantastic. So it's like kind of also a very old marsupial that embodies, is like a vessel. So it's also very interesting as a symbolic thing to start a project thinking in this kind of communicator that is not good and bad, you know. It's already working in a Pre-Columbian museum. It has a lot of issues that you have to take on, and also a vessel. So what we do is that it's very simple, the operation that we do. These are the different representations we have used so far. So you can see there some of them are more sweet than others. And what we do is a very simple, and now we are kind of in a moment of what we are going to do next, is we invite 2 artists per year. And what we try to do is that they come and visit, blah, 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 and then they go home. And what we want is that somehow, it's not that they have to really sort of think in the, like respond specifically about the history of the museum. What I will be for us interesting is that actually they go to the museum and they get drunk with the museum and then they do practice, you know, like they actually, their practice gets sort of affected by the experience of the museum. And we had 4 artists, Asier Mendizabal, you can see that he really worked in the history of the museum. He was the first one. He's an artist from Spain, and very much about the history of the museums and also the expeditions in Ecuador that happened in the 19th century. We had Osias Yanov, who is much